is our Hug webinar is 6 micro tips. And let me advance this here. Just gotta go. We've got Amelia Yak on here. She's our Executive Director of Hug. And then there's me, Jennifer Thompson. And this is how you can get in touch with us anytime you want to ask a question about Hug, or if you have an idea about something, or you want to volunteer to do something. Any of those things are great. Let's see. We want to remind you to go out and check out our Hug website. We just did a total overhaul of it this fall. So if you are looking for any of the resources, like we have a knowledge library, we have a template library. It's now located in the area called resources, which is in that red box at the top, and there's no password or login required to access that area anymore. So go check it out if you're looking for some additional tips, tricks, things like that. The Knowledge Library has a lot of the kind of things that I'm going to teach today in there as well. And don't forget to join our Facebook group. That's where you can post questions to other users and make comments on other users' questions. Great place to interact with HawkSoft users directly. And we also have the National Conference coming up in Orlando, and registration is open right now. You can go out to Eventbrite and search for our 2022 Hug National Conference and sign up now. And today, normally there's a different presenter and I'm just the host, but today I'm the presenter. So it's me, Jennifer Thompson. I'm a project manager. I work here at HawkSoft User Group. And this is what we're going to cover today. You can kind of read through these quickly while I'm talking, because these are just small little things that I pick up over time from other users, from when I was teaching something at the National Conference. And so if you look at this list and you know absolutely everything on there, you can drop off the call. Go ahead, I won't be offended. But I'm hoping that everybody learns at least one thing. I had Kelly Endicott on yesterday, and she learned something when I was going through this, so that was a win for me. I felt like it's hard to teach Kelly something new because she knows so much already. So that's what we're going to cover, and we're going to close out of this, and I'm going to just go right into the HawkSoft management system. We're planning to make this webinar be about 30 minutes, but we can go a little longer if we have lots of questions, but I'm thinking we're going to just go right through these. Let me remind you that if you have a question that you want to ask, please post it into the Q&A area rather than the chat. The chat is just really hard for us to follow and keep track of making sure that we've answered all your questions, but the Q&A really lets us organize and make sure we address everything. So Q&A to ask any questions. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started on our first tip. This is a tip that just came up recently when we were in our Facebook group, and I had somebody asked the question, I answered it, and there were like 4 or 5 people who said, oh my gosh, this is a game changer. And I thought everybody knew this. So it became my first tip. Let's say you have a policy and it's got attachments on every policy in your system. So I've got a dwelling fire, home, and auto, and I need to send an email to somebody with attachments from more than one policy. How do you do that? So this is the way you will do it. You will go to your attachments tab and you will put a check mark in show attachments for all policies. Now I'm seeing the attachments for the auto, the home, and the dwelling fire all simultaneously, and I can use my control key and click on the items that I need to send, right click, and go to email and send as attachment.
Jennifer, can you go ahead and...
And that will launch my email.
Jennifer, could you go ahead and maximize HawkSoft?
You know what? It is pretty max. Is that better? Because it's not going to get much bigger than that. Is that good, Helen? Okay, great. So let me just back up and say that one more time. I'm going to the Attachments tab, putting a check mark and Show Attachments for all policies. Using my control click, you can also do shift click and right click and email, send as attachments. Something else this is really good for is if you need to, let's say you have multiple applications that require signatures. So I have another client set up here, and I'm going to go show attachments for all policies, and I've got some apps for the commercial auto, the general liability, the property, and the work comp. I can right click on this and I can say send for e-signature. So this will launch my e-signature program and send all the attachments in one email versus having to send one attachment out for every item. So I'm curious if this is a new thing for anybody on the class today, because this is something that will really help your workflow if it's something you don't know. Let's see, are we getting any responses?
Yeah, Jennifer, we have a few questions.
Slow down.
Yeah, well, oh, that's a good idea. Actually, I was going to say that too, but here's a few questions. Can you show attachments for just current policies, or will it show attachments for canceled policies too? That could be confusing.
I think it's probably going to show attachments for all policies, even the canceled ones. Would you agree with that, Helen?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think it is going to show all policies. But remember that you can sort these, you know, by date. So a lot of times your attachments, you know, if you sort by date or by categories, you can still break it down to make it a little bit easier to see. Any other questions?
Somebody wrote that they were able to use their central scroller on the mouse to make it bigger, make the screen bigger. If you want to try that, Jennifer. But I can see it. I think it's okay. And then then another question, why can't you attach when you're already in the email?
Well, it just doesn't function that way currently. I'm sure it probably has to do with the idea that you're using an email program. A lot of times people are using Outlook and other programs that are outside of HawkSoft. And so you would have to have a plug-in from HawkSoft into Outlook in order to be able to go back and grab attachments. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why it doesn't exist. But right now you have to just go to the attachments and say you're going to email from there. And do you have anything to add on that, Helen?
Well, I mean, potentially you could, if you opened up a second instance of HawkSoft using the Control-Alt-N feature, you could open up a second instance of HawkSoft and then potentially drag and drop from that second instance.
Right.
But if you're already in midst of the action, you know, sometimes it, you know, usually it's best to just start with, you know, sending the attachments from the attachment screen. But that is an option, you know, in case you're in it and you're like, oops, and need to go back and grab something else.
Okay, so only if the policy tab is showing will the attachments show. It's more of a statement, but.
You know, and of course, somebody's ringing my doorbell right now. In the middle of my webinar, somebody's at my door, but I'm going to just ignore them. So our
Brenda, Joe, Jennifer, Brenda, Joe, we still have a couple more. We have several more questions, if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Brenda, Joe asked, can you select from the document library as well?
That I don't know. Helen, can you address that?
So I would actually kind of need you to elaborate on the document library.
Okay, so
and what we mean by that. That might be something we might need to answer off
okay.
this, just with a little bit more clarification on what that means.
Okay.
If it is, you know, for example, if you mean, you know, by document library, you know, for example, you know, a shared folder, you should be able to drag and drop into an email. But I just, you know, would want to make sure that we're clear on what that question is.
Okay, next question from Emily. Can you do this with two different customer profiles? Say someone needs an attachment from their personal and from a commercial policy they are on.
You wouldn't be able to do that from two different things. Your best bet there would maybe be to open up a separate instance of HawkSoft like Helen was describing, and then you could drag and drop an attachment from two different clients onto one email potentially, but you wouldn't be able to do it from this area here under the attachments, show all attachments for policies. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Okay, so then the next question might be similar. The activity log will then only be on the one policy?
The activity log will most likely be on your client level, because here I'm doing, you know, I'm on the client screen and I'm doing show attachments for all policies. And so it's going to, I think, link to just the client level versus an individual policy. Helen, would you agree with that?
Could you repeat the question for me?
If you're doing this where we're attaching multiple policies, where the activity log is going to end up being at, is it going to be on one particular policy or is it going to be on the client level?
Oh gosh, that is a really good question. It should actually be on whichever policy we're on. Like,
You
for
started,
example, if I'm on
yeah,
the client tab right now, I'd expect it to be on the client tab if that's where I'm checking
right.
the box to show up policies and doing the action. But if, for example, I was on the work tab, a few over, if that's where I had, checked, show attachment for all policy and created the action, I'd expect to see that on that in the activity log.
And Helen, we had
Right.
somebody
So-
ask if you can speak just a touch louder, Helen, or
Oh.
get the microphone closer to you.
Yeah,
There you go.
sorry.
Okay, that's good. That's okay. Thank you. And then Bogus put in the chat, would be good to show that you can pick and choose the attachments using the control button.
Yep, that's what I was doing, using my control
Okay, perfect.
button. I
Oh,
was
good. Perfect.
selecting
Okay.
each of those items that I wanted. You can also highlight one. You can use your shift key and then click on the last one, and that grabs all the things in between.
Perfect.
So control click is for one item at a time. It allows you to kind of jump between different things. The shift click allows you to grab everything in between your clicks.
Okay, and then Tom McKee wrote, are there any canceled policies on the client? If so, test it.
I don't have any canceled on this particular one. This is my sample database, and I don't have that in this one.
Okay, and let's see. Amanda wrote, from my experience, you only get the canceled expired policy information if the canceled policies are shown in the tabs. If they are hidden, they won't show up in the all list. Okay, sorry, more of a statement.
That's wonderful.
And that's going to really depend on your own specific user preferences on what shows. So under your user preferences, you can set parameters on what would show for canceled policies.
I do have some. So you can see here, I'm just right-clicking on that bar and going show all policies or show policies in the last 60 days, show prospects auto, and I can reset that too.
One person wrote,
by default, I have it highlighted.
Somebody wrote, can you drag all into an email? And someone wrote, you can drag emails into an email, or drag files into an email. Do you want to address that, Jennifer?
You can click on this and you can drag and drop something to an email screen. I don't have an email program loaded right now, but that is a possibility. When you launch your email, you may have to, in order to do that, you probably have to open a second instance though of HawkSoft. If you're emailing from that client directly, you're into that activity of emailing from HawkSoft, you'd have to have a second instance of that client open and then drag and drop over to your email. Does that make sense?
Yep. Bill Quickle wrote, just a comment, the use of the category list will also be a big help.
Right, if you're just trying to sort through your attachments because you've got a lot of stuff going on there, you can use these categories. You could sort these by categories. So I don't have very well-defined categories in this particular demo system, but that's another way to organize your screen so that it's easier to find things, is to group by category at the top.
And one wrote, are we ever going to have replies go back into HawkSoft? Helen, that might be a you question.
That's actually more of a development question, to be honest. Definitely good feedback. Some feedback that we've heard definitely prior. So definitely I'll make sure that our development team is aware that that's definitely something of high interest still.
Okay, I think we've gotten through most of these. I think we can move on to the next tip. Somebody asked if we could save all the questions for the end, but I think in this scenario where it's just 6 tips, it probably makes sense to run through them. Jennifer, that's up to you.
Yeah. No, I do think it makes sense to run through them because we're going to be skipping around. We don't have a particular theme to any of these tips, so it'll be kind of weird at the end all of a sudden to
jump back
try to address all of them. Yeah. Certainly, if we miss something, we'll catch it at the end, though. Okay, tip number 2. This has to do with searching, using the new search experience. And this is something I learned at the national conference myself. I was teaching a class about something completely unrelated to this. Darren DeFow was in my class, and somebody asked this question. They said, oh, something about searching for locations. And one of the things now, if you are using the new search experience, which means you have to have the check mark in new search experience, when you want to search on an address, This allows you to search on the address from various places on the client screen. So it allows you to search the client address, the mailing address, but it also allows you to search like the alternate address on an auto policy, an alternate address for a homeowner's policy, or for a dwelling fire. It allows you to search for the location on a commercial property. So I had no idea that it could search all those different areas when you're using this. So I'm going to just show you some examples here. I've got my address for my client, which is, I'm going to just do box 348 and see if that comes up with anything. And there's my address with it searching on this. Now, if I come down to my contact information, I have a physical address down here of 347 South Eau Claire Street, and I can do 347 South Eau Claire Street, and it'll find that as well. And then beyond that, I even have, if you look down on my dwelling fire policies, if I open up this dwelling fire policy, and you look under your general policy information, I've got a completely different address here. So this is the location of the property if it's different from the mailing address or physical address. So maybe this is their vacation home or something else. So I can go back and search and do 444 4th Street. And it allows me to find and locate that policy based off of the address. And then if I move over to the commercial side of things, let me bring up my here's my commercial policy. If I open up a business auto application and show you that I've got under the general policy information, I've got a garaging address. I've also got under my package policy, I thought I opened that, under the package policy, under the, where's my package? Locations. So under here, under locations tab, the address for the location is searchable. The building number is not searchable. I did just learn that, but this address is searchable. So if I go back out to the new search experience, I can do a search on any of those fields that I just showed you, 1111 first, and there it locates my policy. And that was on my commercial package. If I do my commercial auto, I can do the, let's see, that was 6666. And so this was just new to me, that this is a new feature in the address area, that it searches all these different addresses, which can be super useful for you when you're looking for that homeowner's policy or that second home, that dwelling fire, that location. You can use this new search experience. Do I have any questions on that?
We just had one question, but I think you've pretty much just answered it. It was, will that search by address link to location? So if mailing is in a city A and the physical or garaging are in city B, will this work? And the answer is yes, I believe.
Yep. And it's going off of the address, the street address. It does not search off of the city or the state or the zip. It's just doing the street address. So if you were to type in Canby or Westerville, Ohio, none of that would come up. It's based off of the street address that it's searching off of. Okay, so that was tip number 2.
Somebody asked, so this is only searching policy addresses, not client address?
Nope, it did client address. So initially I did, I could do 1, 2, 3, like you can see up here. Actually, let me close back here on this one. So I did P.O. Box, that's their mailing address. I was able to use P.O. Box. I was able to use this address down here, which is their physical address, if they have a different address. Either of those are searchable as well. It's just that in the past, the only 2 addresses you could search off of were those client level addresses. And now with the new search experience, you can search, it's doing client level mailing, client level physical, it's doing the commercial lines locations, and it's doing the alternate addresses on like homes and autos.
Helen, this question might be for you. Is this feature only available for certain versions of HawkSoft?
You would have to be using the new search experience. So depending on your version of HawkSoft, that would depend on whether or not you have access to the new search experience.
Okay.
And really, if you turn this off, you know, you're back here. This is the screen that you have. You'll know what if you have this option available because it'll be right here. It'll say new search experience, and you put a check mark in there. So that's how you turn the new search experience off. There's a little bit of functionality that you have to turn on in the system defaults, but it'll prompt you on what to do for that, because once you turn on the new search experience, some of that information is stored in the cloud, and so you have to have like that cloud services thing, I don't know what you call it, cloud services turned on or approved or enabled in order to have the new search experience.
Yes,
Okay, no
we
more
have to have
questions.
data sync on.
Yeah, data sync has to be on, correct.
Okay, Jennifer, we're all caught up on questions.
Okay, great. Tip number 3, kind of related to addresses. One of the things I think people are unaware that they can do is when they're on a client screen, or sorry, on a policy screen, they can go over to their, policies tab. And this is actually something that I did is I made the policies tab be my default view. So when I open up the policies, or sorry, the client screen, this is what I get. I don't come back to the contacts. I come right to here. And I like this view because I can see a list of all the policies, their effective expiration date, company, premium in a list very easily. But then in addition to that, what I did is I added address so that I can see the location of each of these places right on this screen. And the way you do this is to be on your policies tab, to right click into this grid and say that you want to customize the columns. This is going to open up a list of fields that you could have available in that grid, and you just have to put a check mark in the ones that you want to see. So if you want to see agent 1 or what office somebody is in or the source of this policy, you can add any of those. For instance, I'll add source. And now I can see that in my grid as well. But the tip today really had to do with adding the address because I think that's super useful. Before, when I was showing you the addresses, I had to use the action button and open them up in order for you to see them. But this allows me to just see them right from the client screen on the policies tab. And if you like that policies tab always opening up to that screen, or the client screen always opening up to policies, that's something you can go set in your user settings. So you can go under, oh, am I going in the right place? I feel like I am, but Jennifer Thompson, edit, and it was user preferences. So under user preferences, where it says default client tab, I've set mine to policies. And so now anytime I open up that policy, it opens to policies, or that client screen rather. Any questions about that, Amelia or Helen?
Yeah, yes, we have a couple. Oh, go
It
ahead.
looks like
Go.
Danielle was hoping that we could show how to get into the customized settings again.
Sure, yep. Okay, are we talking about right here under the grid? I went to the policies tab. I've got my grid showing, and I just right-clicked into that area, and I got this option to customize columns. And that's what brings up the list. You can't add to this list. I mean, the list is what it is, but you can check mark the things that you want to appear in the grid. And now it adds it into that grid. And you can move these around as well, so that they can, you know, and I'm going to ask Helen, is this when I'm adding things to this grid, am I doing this as my user, or am I doing this for everybody in the agency? I suspect it's just for me.
That's just for you.
Yep. So changing this will not change it for other people in the system. It's just changing it for you in your view. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, there was one. Does this customizing apply to all clients or just the one you are in? And that was about 5-6 minutes ago. So it was kind of when you got started.
No, so that's going to apply to all clients that you open.
Okay.
But just for your settings. It wouldn't apply now if Amelia was doing this in her system, and because we share a system, she wouldn't see the same view because she's a different user. So this is a user setting, but it does apply to all clients that you open up.
And somebody asked, how do you default to this screen?
So to default to the policies tab, you go under your user list. Actually, yeah. Is there another way to get to that without having to go to the user list, Helen?
If you go to where the preferences, if you go right there, yeah, user preferences.
Yeah, right there. Right up at the top, if you go to user preferences, because not everybody has access to going in through the user area the way I did. You'd have to be an admin, but if you go in through the user preferences right at the top, then here's the option default client tab to policies. That's what I selected. It's a drop down, and I want it to always open up to the policy list.
We've had a few people ask if we can show it again, but I'm just trying to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. So in the interest of time, we'll just let you watch the recording, and it looks like some people are answering how to do that. So if that's okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Tip
I know
number
it's hard
three.
to catch.
That
I know
was
it's
tip
hard to
number
catch everything. We'll just go a little slower. How about that, Jennifer?
Okay, I'll try to go slower. This is a really small tip, and I think, but it's really excellent. I'm going to pull up, Safeco. I'm pretty sure that most of you have all created a client file for a lot of your carriers. And so I've got a Safeco file going here. And one of the things, this is the thing that came from Gary Paulson, who's on the webinar today. Thank you, Gary. His idea here was that when you're entering your contacts in the system, that you could add phone tree information to your contact. So if you look down here, I've got Bob Jones. So I'm sure you've all been in phone tree hell sometimes. It's like you get on there and you got to wait to figure out what number should I press to get to the right person. So in the description area, I've just got in there that this is the phone number you're going to call this person, and then to get to them directly, I'm going to press 2, 2, and 5, and then I don't have to listen to the whole phone tree. So this is just a little tip on getting through to people really quickly and how you can document that in your system under your contacts area.
I love this tip. I think this is so great.
I know. I mean, we all figured that you can put in extensions. It was like, yeah, of course extensions make sense, but then the phone tree idea, I was like, oh yes, because having to get through a phone tree sometimes can be very frustrating.
George thinks this is rad. Rad.
Isn't it rad? Does that mean George learned something new?
I would say that might mean that.
That might mean that. That's, again, if George can learn something, that's impressive because he knows so much already. All right,
and,
thanks, George, for
Jennifer,
that tip.
I'm assuming this small print that people are having a hard time viewing, this is an epidemic within HawkSoft that is probably unavoidable until we get to the cloud. Is that true, Helen, generally?
I mean, when it comes to the font, a lot of times you can adjust that based off of your Windows preferences. Depending upon what is small, if you go to View and then Fonts, you can change a few different things, but it's not universal. So depending on what's small, it would really depend on whether or not going to View Fonts would help. But we can change certain areas in HawkSoft that way.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody said if it's adjustable if you're watching it on your iPad, so that's nice. Okay.
And I think that when you get it in full view, like when you watch the recording, make sure that you're watching it in full screen as well, because that'll make the resolution work much better too.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, moving on to tip number 5. This is located in your system defaults under your policy company setup. And I'm going to go over to a company. I have Safeco set up. This tip is that when you're in the area called policy info, you have to add in your list of NAIC codes. But what NAIC code does that associate with related to the program? And if you're in the Accord form, how do you know which one is which? So this tip came from John Morton. Here's what he does. When he's entering in his programs, he puts in the program name, a dash, and then he puts in the NAIC code afterwards. So if you look at each of these, I've added in my programs. I put in the NAIC codes, as well as putting them over here. I still need them under the NAIC list, but I've got them listed in both locations. And how this really helps is if I go look into a policy, so I'm going to open up my policies again, and I'm going to do an action. if I go under the general policy information, here's where you're selecting your NAIC code number, and it's like, well, which one should I be picking? Who knows, right? But if I go to look, oh, you know what? I got to switch. Oh, let's get out of, I forgot, I didn't set it up to do with auto because they have different states. So that's kind of a bad example. Let me back out of that and let's do it on the work comp. In case you missed that, they're separate setups for different states. So I'm going to go to my general policy information. Here's my NAIC dropdown. I'm going to pick Safeco as my company. I'm going to pick my plan, which is Safeco Insurance Company of Indiana, and then there's my NAIC code 11215. I still need to select that here because this NAIC code is what flows to other areas of the system, like a certificate of insurance. But now I'm not just looking at a straight number drop down that I have no idea how it correlates to the to the program. And so I thought this was just a brilliant tip. Thank you very much, John.
Is this primarily for, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it is primarily for commercial lines, but
right.
If anyone wants to disagree and say that it's for personal lines, feel free to type that in the comments in the chat area.
And Brenda Jo wrote, will that be fixed so that it actually is linked to the actual carrier? I'm assuming she means when we go to the cloud, but I'm not sure about that. Helen, do you know?
It hasn't been mentioned as of yet, but I know that there's been a lot of good feedback from customers and wanting that to be the case. So definitely our development team is aware.
Okay.
So fingers crossed, but it might be something that is more further down the line.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, I think we're all caught up, Jennifer.
Okay, this is going to be our last tip of the day, and I'm going to just back out of here. This is something that I personally like. I'm going to pull up this client record. This has to do with searching and looking through your activity log. And there are about 100 different ways you can slice and dice things when it comes to your activity log. But this is just an alternate way. What I'm going to do is show you how you can use a keyword search without having to go and then open all of the separate documents, the separate activities that have that keyword. So we all know we can go here and type in proposal, and that narrows down my list of all the things that have proposal in it, but now I've got to double click and open these all up to read each one to see what it is. There's another way to go about doing that, and that is to go into any activity log on the screen and just double click to open it up. Go up to the button right here that looks like a little filter button, or that's what it's supposed to look like, I think. It looks like a funnel, and change this to say all logs. What this is going to do is, right now this screen is just showing me this one activity log. By changing to all logs, it's putting all activity logs from the entire client screen into one viewable screen. And now what I can do is search by a keyword. I can do Control F, which is the find function, and I can type in proposal, and I can say find next. So this is going to just drop me down. Each time I hit find next, it's finding that keyword, and I can then read that activity report and not have to go in and out, in and out, in and out of various activity logs. I can just scroll down to that area and read it based off of my keyword search. And so just to jump back out and kind of repeat where I got that, I'm in my activity log. I just open any activity. I go up to the funnel button, and I select all logs, and then Control F for find, and you type in your keyword, and you do find next. And incidentally, if you ever need to print out all your activity logs, which I really hope that doesn't happen because that might mean you're having an E&O exposure, this is where you would go to do that too. You would come in here and say all logs, and you would hit your print button, and that'll print all activity logs for that client screen. All right, that wraps up my 6 tips. Do we have any questions on that last one?
Just a comment. I think it's just a comment. from Anne. If you use the main keyword search, you can flip through each log note using the up and down arrow on the toolbar. We migrated from a different system and found that the old system log notes did not work using the main search log function. We had to use the filter log search to search these old logs.
And so what was she saying she was doing though? She was just going, I'm not sure if I'm following.
If you use the main keyword search, you can flip through each log note using the up-down arrow on the toolbar.
I'm not following that quite, but maybe somebody else is having some success with that, but that's okay. Somebody understands that?
She double-click the first note, George said.
You got to do that, and then you can.
Oh, right. There she goes.
There next to the funnel.
There it is on the up-down. Yeah. On the toolbar there, up-down arrow.
Oh, up here. Okay, I see. Okay, I just learned something too because I didn't know you could do that.
Awesome.
Great
Okay.
tip.
Well, any last-minute questions before we wrap up? Thank you, Jennifer. You did a great
You're
job.
welcome. So
great tips.
Thank you.
Helen, thank you for helping.
Yes, thank you very much. And this is being recorded, so as soon as the video is available after it's done being rendered, we will send everybody an email with a link to the recorded webinar so you can watch it again if you need to, or share it with somebody else in your agency. All right, and I'm going to sign off. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thanks.
Happy holidays.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.